Good evening, everyone. As with many of you, this may be the first time I've put a suit on this year. I hope that all of you have got full formal dress on and you're not wearing pyjamas as you dial into this today. I'm honoured and somewhat slightly confused to be asked to talk to such a prestigious group as the Barbados Association of Professional Engineers, because I'm not an engineer. I'm a biochemist. So I do feel a bit of a fraud talking about innovation to a group whose real job is innovation. But thank you very much for the opportunity to chat to you tonight about a topic I'm absolutely passionate about. Innovation has been fundamental to my life as a practicing scientist, and I hope in these few minutes today to encourage you to place innovation at the top of or central to your lives, your professional lives, and actually into your personal lives as well. I think by doing that, the more of us who take innovation as a life skill, I think we'll hopefully be able to transform the Barbados economy. It's almost trite to say that innovation surrounds us, but oftentimes we don't realize it until someone points out the obvious. Think about the innovation that's occurred since you each entered the workplace. In my case, my first day in a real job was in a small town in rural New Zealand, and on that day I noticed that all purchase orders, and they were received from any of 15 global customers, they were all received down a thing called a telex machine. My first day at work coincided with the arrival of a very new weird machine called a fax machine. If you think back to those days, we've got cryptocurrency now, the internet, email, Amazon, Netflix, Facebook, hoverboards, the list goes on. These are all new in my time. I'm sure there's a lot of things that are new in your time as well. But innovation is something that drives progress. It is the very definition of progress. These things are all new, and telex machines only exist in museums now. What marks each advance in modern civilization is that they were invented by either a scientist or an engineer. So we're sort of family. Not one of them was invented by a lawyer, by an accountant, by an HR person. Scientists and engineers, and we should probably add farmers and fisher folk, etc. These are arguably the only people who create real value and who therefore propel our standards of living worldwide. It's a really important thing to remember as you go through your personal life as an engineer or a scientist, that you are responsible for progress. Without scientists and engineers, civilization doesn't progress. It's therefore up to us individually to realize our responsibility for creating this progress and prosperity. Too often we see the lawyers and the politicians as being the ones who we should look to set the direction for the country, when in reality they are the ones who set the limits on what a country can achieve. Think, for example, foreign exchange and cryptocurrency. These are technologies that are widely available overseas, and yet we in Barbados don't have access to them. What does that do? Those restrictions hold up progress. You'll excuse me being outspoken. I've lived in Barbados for 25 years, having come from New Zealand. I'm married to a lady from Eritrea in Africa, so we have a bit of a world view. Though I can never consider myself a Bajan, I feel I've at least earned the right to comment a bit on society here. New Zealand's a country far away from anywhere. It also had a colonial past. Being away from that mother country made us self-reliant and engendered an almost rabid culture of self-reliance. We can pretty much fix anything with whatever is lying around. We have a can-do attitude because we had to. We had to survive. And heaven help any politician who got in our way. When the mother country abandoned us to join the European bloc in 1973, we had to find new markets for our dairy produce. Today, New Zealand is responsible for over 30% of the world's dairy products. Not bad for a little country of 5 million people. That was all to do with attitude and that attitude was driven by a survival instinct. In Barbados, in contrast, I find a people who are largely reticent to challenge the norms. We whine, but we don't protest. We accommodate, and we never resist or refuse. Here, compliance with pointless rules, often arbitrarily imposed by a security guard or other official, are the norm. This compliance is a mindset that manifests itself in sayings like a crab in a bucket. We don't like people who want to crawl out of that bucket. But limp compliance is a tacit acceptance of the status quo. It's a reluctance to change, and it's a reluctance to improve. Comfort can be gained by the status quo, but it's not going to improve things. With today's fast pace, standing still is the equivalent of going backwards. And this means that without innovation, Barbados's living standards will start to erode. Barbados's approach to education seems to me the core of why we don't innovate. Education here is largely based on regurgitation, not on reasoning, logic, and challenging accepted wisdom. Our kids aren't allowed to have an opinion. A bit more on this later. As I've mentioned, I work at Lenstec. We have 200 Bajans and 2 foreigners. We've established a thriving international business. We export to more than 60 countries, with major exports into China, the US, and Europe. We've shown that Bajans can successfully run a high-tech international business, and we compete successfully with companies that produce similar products in the UK, Germany, Russia, China, India, France, the USA. Every year, we make 500,000 to 600,000 intraocular lenses. These are tiny little medical devices that go inside people's eyes when they have cataract surgery. Think about that. These things that your grandmother might have in their eye, they were manufactured in a factory in Christchurch. We make the best lenses in the world. We don't compromise. The absolute root of what we do is innovation. I want to explain why innovation is critical to us. From day one, we made innovation the strategy upon which we built the company. In our industry, it's not good enough to just have a quality product, because everybody has to have a quality product. If you don't have a quality product and you put it in someone's eye, they go blind, you are out of business within a year. There is no compromise. If we were happy to make the same products year in, year out, year after year, the inevitable commoditization of manufacturing goods means that the Chinese will be copying us in 5 years. So, when we set up in 1996, we've put every dollar we ever made straight back into R&D, straight into innovation. To the point that now, today, 2020, we are one of the highest tech companies in our industry sector anywhere in the world. We've done that with a Bajan R&D and engineering team, full of scientists and engineers, no lawyers. We still do it every day. In the past 2 months, for example, we've applied for British standards and European approval for 2 new lens designs, developed and validated here in Barbados. We're also waiting for US Food and Drug Administration approval for the world's most advanced multifocal intraocular lens. Again, developed here, all through Bajan intellect, education, and effort. We're extremely proud of this, but to be honest, it wasn't a decision we had to make. If in 1996 we'd not decided to put innovation central to what we do, central to our corporate philosophy, we would have been out of business by the turn of the century. The lenses that we sold in 1996 now only account for 3% of our sales, and their average selling price is 1/30 that of our newest multifocal lens. For us, innovation was about survival, and in personal terms, innovation is about providing stable employment for my 200 colleagues. I think it's self-evident that the need to innovate driven by the fear of someone coming along and eating your lunch, applies to countries as much as it does to businesses. Witness the fear in the Barbados tourism sector that came along when President Obama said, yep, Americans can now go to Cuba. Sandy beaches, sun and rum can be replicated in many, many places. So differentiation and innovation are critical to the survival of the tourism sector and also the entire society. So, if we've all agreed that innovation is critical to Barbados' future, what's stopping us? Why aren't we doing it? Why aren't we moving forward? What can we do about it? I'd like to use my remaining time to discuss a few points, ending in a call for us all to make a personal decision to innovate. I just want to mention that personal decision. Every day, I look at everything, whether I'm at home, in the car, or at work. All of the time, I'm thinking, how can we improve this? How can we improve that? It's just part of who I am. So point one, the role of government. Well, I noticed since I've lived here that everybody complains about the government, and they say the government needs to do this, government needs to do that. Well, it's pretty clear to me that while we sit and wait for government to do something about the lack of innovation, it's really got nothing to do with government. It's about us. There's a guy from Boston called Michael Porter. He wrote a book called The Competitive Advantage of Nations. And in it, he gives you a distinct idea that the correct thing for government to do is to create what's called an enabling environment. It's a business environment which is efficient, allows you to do business efficiently. It has a level playing field. There's no bribery or corruption or anything like that. It is easy to do business, and then government should get the hell out of the way. There are many examples around the world where governments have decided, oh, we're going to do this industry, we're going to do that industry. And more often than not, they fall flat on their faces and it doesn't work. Government's role is not to choose industry champions. We need to stop asking government to provide protection and subsidies and everything. Instead, we need to demand that government looks at creating personal capital. That's a fancy term for people. People who are imbued with a desire to innovate. That brings me to point two, education. Going back to education again. My wife and I have 3 kids. One of them is an aspiring engineer. She's at MIT. We have one in secondary school and one in primary school still. So I'm pretty well familiar with the education system here. To me, the only critical role for government in fostering a mindset of innovation is to ensure that our education system moves out of the 19th century. While I'm sure Caribbean studies is important, the innovators of the future need to understand skills like project management, product life cycles, presentation skills, people skills, international business, finance. Where are these skills in our secondary school, our CXC, CSEC, and CAPE curricula? Pretty difficult to find them. I'll just ad-lib a bit here. I know that there are a lot of kids who go from Barbados education system, which is excellent. It is an excellent system here. And they will go into education in America. And they always do well because they're usually 1 or 2 years academically higher than American students. But what they don't have is the confidence that's given to them by the American education system. That's something we need to give our kids, confidence, not ramming compliance down their throats. A failure to educate our children with these skills that we need today to innovate, will guarantee that their skill sets will become increasingly out of date. It's our role to press for those kind of skills to be taught. Point 3. I mentioned before that government's role is not to innovate. It's all about our personal characteristics. I remember long ago as a kid in New Zealand, I was told about this concept of bankruptcy. And just use this as an illustrative example. Bankruptcy in New Zealand was something, if someone became bankrupt, they were scarred for life. They were tarred, in their position in the community, they were always looked down upon. Oh, he was a failure. Many years later, I started working with an American. Actually, he's the guy who set up Lenstec. And he'd been pretty close to bankruptcy at one point. The American system doesn't tar you with that, doesn't scar you with that. It says, okay, you failed, pick yourself up and get on with it again. It means that you don't have a stain on your character. And what that does is that it means to people, I don't have to fear failing. We have a fear of failing here. That fear of failing means that you don't take risks. Any Americans that you meet, they're not scared to take risks. They always have an opinion. They will take risks. And that risk-taking means that you can make mistakes with impunity. Making a mistake is not a bad thing. I tell my staff, if you make a mistake, tell someone, cross a line on it, sign your name, and get on with it. And if there's a mistake that's a big one, we'll work it out. The absolute worst thing you can do is not tell us if you made a mistake. But there is no penalty for making a mistake. Making mistakes is the best way to learn. And as I've worked in the US medical device industry for the past 25 years, I see how this risk-taking approach, it results in rapid product development because people have ideas, they will try those ideas, and if those ideas don't work, hey, no problem. Pick yourself up and try another one. But if it does work, then you've got a new product, you've got a new industry, you've got a new sector. You create wealth, and that wealth is shared amongst everybody. But if you're too scared to take risks, that product development, that innovation doesn't occur. So for the youngest of you looking at this, I think the best lesson is don't be afraid to fail. Pick yourself up and move. In Barbados, we have a high fear of failing. And that might be why we don't innovate. I want to talk about innovation and commercialization. It's often talked that the jet engine was invented in the UK, but they didn't know what to do with it. And it was taken over by the Americans, and they learned to commercialize jet engines. The ability to, what's called first mover advantage, isn't always the success of commercializing something. You've got to be aware of where you sit in that commercialization process. But IP, intellectual property, is something that you develop doing research. So scientists generally develop it, but engineers then will take it and commercialize it. What you see now is the Americans are all complaining because the Chinese are taking their technology and commercializing it as well. It's just a natural life cycle. So if the Chinese are now eating the lunch of the Americans who ate the lunch of the Europeans, where does that leave Barbados? Well, I think it leaves us in a place with lots of opportunities, because Lenstec sells a lot of lenses to China. We sell a lot of lenses to America. And that shows that those two countries want to buy Bajan-made stuff because they recognize it as the world's best. So we can do it. We shouldn't make excuses for ourselves as being a small country. There's two other personal characteristics that I think are important to driving innovation. The first is personal responsibility. I was raised to believe that my word is my bond. If you give a handshake to somebody, that's as important as a contract. It doesn't always happen anymore. But it meant that I didn't get an employment contract. I agreed to my job on a telephone call from Africa to America. 25 years later, I still don't have an employment contract. If I'm doing a good job, I'll stay in the job. If I'm not, I deserve to be kicked out. Too often, though, we see people who don't take pride in their work. They don't stand behind the quality of their work. And their reputation doesn't mean anything to them. Take a very local example. Lenstec's new building, which was built in 2008, built by a local contractor, it still has uneven concrete floors. It still has cracks in the walls. It still has electrical outlets which aren't straight. There's one electrical outlet that still lets water in when the rain comes from a certain direction. If we at Lenstec applied that same lack of pride to the products we sell, we wouldn't be selling them. It's important to have pride in what you do. That's why surgeons around the world think of Lenstec as a brand that means supreme quality. When we first came here in 1996, we were concerned, what will the international concept of brand Barbados do for us? As a tourism product, brand Barbados is great, but as a manufactured product, what does it mean? Well, luckily people took us on. There was no bad connotation to brand Barbados, and over 25 years we've built up a stellar international brand, which I think reflects on the quality of Barbados as well. So this brings me to sort of my last point. What I think is the most important factor in innovation. It's passion. You're not going to innovate if you don't have a passion for it. Now, passion can be driven by desire. Some people have it inherent to them. It can be driven by desperation to put food on the table. It can be driven by pride, by belief. But if you've got that passion, if you hold it deep in your heart, as I do, innovation becomes a habit. It becomes part and parcel of who you are and what you do every day. You will always see cracks in the wall. I always see cracks in the wall at Lenstec. You will always see the potholes in the road, and you'll wonder why somebody doesn't fix those damn potholes and fix it right first time, next time. But more importantly, yes, the downside is you will see those problems there. The upside is you will always see opportunities. And when you see opportunities, there is a chance to see things that can be done to improve things. A solution to a problem is always going to find a good market. As engineers and scientists, we know that we have the technical ability to innovate. We know that our success, and come on, let's be honest, the success of our nation depends on us doing that. Each of us knows we have to do it, but it requires a personal decision to do it. So go on. Where does your heart tell you that you can make an impact? What problem would you like to solve? Can you see a technical path to solving it? Can you see a business opportunity to make out of it? Why the hell not go out and do it? When I left New Zealand in 1993, I asked my dad whether or not I should go overseas. And he said, if you go and it doesn't work out, you can always come back. If you don't go, you'll never know. You'll never know what you've missed. And you can always come back anyway. And your friends will be doing the same thing they're doing now. And they will have missed out on the life that you've had overseas. Well, I ended up in this paradise, in the Caribbean, just because I wasn't too scared to take his advice. It was a scary decision, but it ended up being an exciting life. I am so glad I listened to my dad, don't tell him that. And I didn't take the easy option of accepting the status quo. My main message is everybody needs to get out of their comfort zone, because the comfort zone is going backwards. That was my innovation. What's yours? Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy your virtual party. Thank you.